and welcome to our next module. And thank you to those who have got their research assignment done. I marked some of them. I have not marked them all. I'll get in there and finish that off. And so I'm not going to give out the prizes yet, although I've noted a few pretty good ones. So well done, excellent effort. And I've enjoyed reviewing those, and you'll all get the opportunity to have a look at others once we've got them in and we've done the marking. We'll upload them to the learning management system so you can have a look at them. Yeah, so that'll be done in the next few days, and you'll get some feedback. But everybody's doing really well on that. And this session, we've got some stuff on how to look at the audits when it gets a bit more technical detail, technical end designs and the like. And we've asked Jamie Robinson, our technical lead at Safe Systems Solutions, to come along and present some of this. And I'll give a little bit of Jamie's background shortly. We also have Tony Bull coming in to talk about construction site road safety audits and some considerations for safety around construction sites and how we as auditors can inject safety in our processes and assist construction sites to operate safely for workers and road users. So that'll be good. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit more info on the categorization of things into primary or supporting. And that's because today's quiz is all about that categorization, which a lot of people have trouble with. So we decided to really focus a quiz on that. And I'm going to need to spend a little bit of time with you at the end, just honing in on that. But yeah, so I'll introduce Jamie. Jamie and I worked at Vic Roads together a long time ago, and Jamie did a variety of roles there, including some time as the there it is. Oh yeah, the stuff. There you go. Technical lead, traffic and design for a good portion of time. And Jamie certainly does a lot of road safety auditing and technical advice, and works on a lot of Austroads project. We were just chatting before about his big Austroads median safety treatment project that he's buried away in. Jamie leads our road safety barrier design course as well, which is a 2 or 3 day course, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, and there's a variety of other technical skills. So if you've got all those very technical end questions, unleash them on Jamie rather than me, I say. No, I'd be happy to have a go at them. Anything I missed there, Jamie?
No, that all sounds good, Ken.
Okay, well, I'll hand it over to you to run this first bit. Jamie's contact details are in your notes there, everybody, if you wanted to follow up with anything. Today I will be in the behind the scenes running that role, so you can still write into the chat your questions for Jamie. Jamie may pause and give out a prize or two along the journey. But over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Ken, and hi, everyone. So today I'll be talking about doing road safety audits at the design end of the spectrum, and also with a focus on heavy vehicles. Why heavy vehicles, I hear you ask? Well, heavy vehicles they're an integral part of the design process, and their requirements do influence a lot of the geometric requirements of roads. That's one reason. The other is that heavy vehicles are highly overrepresented in the crash problem that we see on our roads. So it's really important that we're catering adequately to them. But before I get into that, I just want to touch on the difference between the standards or a design review and a road safety audit. There certainly is some overlap between the processes. And of course, if you are meeting all relevant standards, then you are leading to a safer solution than if you are not. But that's not to say that designing something to standard will not have its issues. So when you're doing a road safety audit, you really are focused on the road safety implications of a design. If something doesn't meet a standard, you need to think about, is it safe? It's often the case that a standard is not met and it may not have an associated safety issue. Conversely, a standard may be met, but there still may be some safety issues there. So as an auditor, really put that safety hat on, try and put standards to the side, put yourself in the position of the road users that would be expected to use the piece of road and interact with all the different design features, and really think about, is there a safety issue? So to do that, you will receive lots of different information, primarily the design drawings, which could be quite a hefty set, especially if you're doing an audit at the detailed design stage. You could have hundreds of plans to look at, made up of all sorts of different design drawings. But on top of that, it's important to understand a few things that have driven the design. What is the design vehicle? For one, what is the speed environment that you're dealing with? Or more importantly, what is the design speed? What speed has the design been based upon? Now, those first two dot points together will dictate a lot of those geometric elements of the road. The layouts of intersections, sight distance requirements, horizontal and vertical geometry, even your cross section. Vehicle swept path requirements should be checked as an integral part of the design process. You may have been provided with some swept path diagrams along with the designs. If you have not, and you think it's important to review those, by all means request them from the client or the designer. And if they can't readily be provided, that's a bit of a red flag. It's important to understand some traffic data, so the number and the mix of vehicles that are using a particular piece of road. You might have some information on pedestrian and cyclist use. You might even look to something like Strava to understand what pedestrians and cyclists do in the area. The crash history of the site may be provided to you. You may access some publicly available information. There's a bit of a disclaimer there that the crash history shouldn't drive an RSA. And I know auditors that prefer not to see or know the crash history of a site when they're undertaking an audit, because they don't want to be influenced or have the blinkers on, so to speak, and only be concerned about the types of crashes that have happened in the past. We know that there is a randomness to the type and location of crashes, but certainly if there is a trend of a particular crash type, I find it useful information to have when you're doing an audit. If any audits have been undertaken previously, it's a good idea to review those. You can check off whether earlier findings have been addressed in the design, and it's a good exercise to go through to review audit reports of others. Every auditor does things a little bit differently, so it can be an educational thing to review any previous audit reports as well. On top of all of those things, I encourage you to seek any information that you think will help you understand the context of the project or how the design has been arrived at. I'll now talk about a few common issues that you may well encounter undertaking audits. A few of these relate to the types of vehicles that the design is based on. So we talk about design vehicles, and I'm sure some of you know what a design vehicle is, some of you may not. The design vehicle is the largest vehicle that's expected to use the piece of road or intersection on a regular basis. And we want to design for the design vehicle to be able to navigate that piece of road in a desirable way. So make its turns and all movements from within the correct lane to not encroach curbed areas or islands, not have to swing onto the opposing traffic lane to make a turn, these type of things. We also talk about checking vehicles, and any design will have a nominated design vehicle or vehicles and a checking vehicle. Now, the checking vehicle is a larger vehicle again that might be expected to come along once in a while. And because it only comes along fairly infrequently, we accept that it might navigate the road in a less than desirable way. So it might have to mount a curb or an island to make a turn. And in that case, we might decide to pave behind the curb to accommodate that vehicle. Or it might need to swing out onto the other side of the road to make a turn, these types of things. But again, because it doesn't happen very often, we accept that. And it might be the case that the vehicle is under an escort or traffic management or something, so the risk is mitigated. So an issue can be that the design does not cater for the swept paths of the chosen design vehicle. Or it could be that the choice of design vehicle is not correct. So we're talking about design stage audits, but on the most part, design projects are upgrades to existing pieces of road. So you can put yourself out on the ground and observe what's happening around you, think about the types of vehicles that are using the road, think about surrounding land use, and the types of vehicles that will be generated. You need to look to the future as well. Any changes in land use that might attract some larger vehicles can be an important consideration. So some typical design vehicles, you can see a couple pictured there. This one I think you'll find is a service vehicle. It's an 8.8 metre long truck, which is representative of a garbage truck or a removal truck, the type of vehicle that we would expect to be able to access basically any residential street. A larger design vehicle at the bottom, which is a B double, that'd be about 25 or 26 metres long, that might be an appropriate design vehicle for a large arterial road intersection. So what does it matter if our choice of vehicle is incorrect or our swept paths haven't been checked properly? These larger vehicles might encroach into areas that they shouldn't. They might cross into adjacent traffic lanes with potential for crashes with other vehicles. They might encroach pedestrian areas. You might see vehicle conflicts, perhaps between concurrent right turn movements. And a telltale sign can be impacts with roadside furniture, signs, curbs, broken pits, these type of things.
Questions come in. Is a design vehicle the physically largest or most common vehicle? Just wanted the clarity on that.
It's typically the longest vehicle that would be expected to use the piece of road. So it's certainly not the most common. It's typically a truck of some description. And I say longest, it's not necessarily the longest, but it's the one with the sort of worst performance characteristics in terms of its swept path, which is typically the longest vehicle. It might be an articulated truck.
Right. And that would go there on a regular basis? On
a regular basis.
Yeah. So
whereas the checking vehicle is a larger vehicle again that we'd only expect to see very irregularly. So we don't feel the need to design our pavement areas to cater to it, because you can go too far the other way and design intersections that are too large if you're basing on too large a vehicle. And that can result in issues like, excessive pavement areas. It can be hard to delineate. You can see smaller vehicles making turns at excessive speeds and these types of things.
So, like, I suppose, what's an example of that? Would it be like a removalist truck in a residential street? Would be like a checking vehicle?
Probably it would be your design vehicle, and there's an Austroads guide that sets out some typical combinations of design and checking vehicle requirements for different sort of intersection scenarios. So for a smaller sort of local road environment type of intersection, you might design to a service vehicle and check for, it's got a 12.5 metre truck or bus, which is sort of your next step up in your suite of design vehicle options.
Okay. So Tom's just popped in there also. So do we always have to cater for the checking vehicle, e.g. mountable traffic islands needed if design vehicle doesn't mount, but checking vehicle does?
Well, yes, so we do need to cater to the checking vehicle in some way. It must be able to navigate the intersection, but perhaps not in a desirable way, or usually not in a desirable way. So it'll make some hook turns and swing across the road, mount the islands and so on. And if that vehicle is required to mount an island, that's where you do need to pave within those islands. Yeah.
And I think it's worth reinforcing your earlier point, which is one, always good as a road safety auditor, have your eye out that it's not excessive in terms of catering for some very large vehicle that may hardly ever be there because of those dangers of very wide openings and higher speed of smaller vehicles and other issues that may be caused. I mean, it's less frequent that happens, but it's always good to have in the back of your mind. It's more the other way around. Usually they haven't been able to cater for a large vehicle that's frequently there. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. Please keep the questions coming. So I mentioned the Austroads guides. There are lots of standards and guidelines around catering to the swept path requirements of larger vehicles in the Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 4 in particular, and the Austroads Turning Path Guide. In the old days, we had transparencies that looked like this image on the right, and you'd see designers sort of swiveling them around the top of plans to check whether these larger vehicles could fit. These days, it's all done in CAD using a program like AutoTurn. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen the outputs of that software. The guides do set out some important requirements around the radii of turn manoeuvres. And you can see here a minimum radius of 15 metres is nominated for this particular situation. There's a clearance nominated between the swept paths of those opposing right turns and also between the two vehicles travelling in the same direction. So these are some of the things that can be checked by reviewing swept path diagrams. And here's an example of a swept path diagram. Not a very good one, I'll add. This really does appear to be a highly constrained location where an intersection has been designed within the available space, and an attempt has been made to show, either show that trucks can navigate the intersection or to demonstrate what a truck would need to do to navigate that intersection. A few things that I'll point out, and there's a lot going on. It is important to understand what you're looking at. Lots of lines going on, dashed lines, solid lines that represent different things. You can turn on and off lines that represent these different things. But typically we have lines representing wheel paths, which are these dashed lines. We have some solid lines at the edge of the vehicle body. And then the parallel solid lines on either side represent an additional clearance to the vehicle body. The Austroads guides talk about providing a 1/2 metre clearance between the vehicle and any roadside objects or curbs. So that's why that additional line is usually shown or should be shown. There's a line along the centre line of the vehicle path, and if you can see where my mouse is pointing now, you'll see this line has quite a number of little arrowheads along it. Each of those arrowheads basically represent a change in direction or turn radius along that vehicle path, or a mouse click when the designer has generated it. So this one, with all of its changes in direction, is not a realistic turn path. If designed by the book, these turn paths should have been constructed on a single radius, single curve, single radius, in accordance with the requirements of the guide. And that would have seen this purple swept path continue further into the intersection, overlap the blue swept path, and not appear to avoid it with a 1 metre clearance, as has been shown there. So all of those arrowheads really do sort of ring alarm bells, and is something to be mindful of. The blue swept path from the other direction is better. Again, it does have a number of arrowheads, and I suspect hasn't been drawn quite as it should, but is a more realistic swept path. As an auditor, you need to think now about what is the issue associated with this, potentially not catering to the swept paths of these concurrently turning trucks. And it's a bit hard to see, but it looks like we're dealing with an articulated truck, a semi-trailer or a B-double perhaps, and probably the same from the other direction. So in thinking about the issues and the risk of those issues, you'd need to think about the likelihood of 2 large trucks arriving and making the right turns at the same time. If they did arrive at the same time, what's the likelihood that they would continue into a collision path? They would likely take evasive action, which might lead to other issues. It might mean the truck makes the turn on a smaller radius and perhaps might cross over into some opposing traffic lanes in this area or something like that. So as an auditor, it's your task to consider and assess the risk of those issues. So you can see in the centre of the diagram, a clearance is achieved or appears to have been achieved as per the guide. However, I question the way that these diagrams have been drawn. Another possible safety issue is at this northwest corner of the intersection, where there's very little space between the property boundary and the curb. So there's potential for vehicles to strike the fence or wall at that property boundary. If pedestrians were present, there wouldn't be room for them to safely pass through that area. A standards review might pick up an issue such as the one that you can see the southwest corner here, where the conduits for the signal arrangement pass through private property rather than remain within the road reserve.
What would you do, Jamie, if you noticed that standards review finding in an audit? If you were pouring through the plans and you saw that and you raised an eyebrow at it, but you're doing a road safety audit, what would you do?
I would likely mention that to the client perhaps in an email, or even just verbally, I would capture it in some way, but I wouldn't include it in my RSA report because it doesn't have a safety issue associated with it, and in all likelihood wouldn't be built in that way. And if it was included in the report, it would perhaps detract from other, findings that did have safety implications. So I would, if I picked up something like that, I would raise it with the client, but separate to the road safety audit report.
Yep, great.
Here's another example of a swept path diagram. This is actually a design that we inherited that had some swept path checks done, and the suggestion was that the design was fine, that it did cater to the larger vehicles that needed to use the intersection, which in this case were buses. We had our doubts and we ran some of our own checks. And you can see here that there are some movements where the vehicle is likely to encroach areas that it shouldn't. Something that I'll point out here as well is that the turn radius is noted. In this case, it's a 12.5 metre radius. I like to see that on swept path diagrams, just for transparency. You can see that the designer's intent. But obviously this vehicle drawn at that radius may well encroach this pedestrian area or strike the stairwell at this corner of the intersection. Alternatively, it would need to take a wider path, swing out into the intersection, possibly into a collision situation with other traffic. So I guess I raise this example to demonstrate that swept path diagrams are something that can be quite easily fudged. Designers can construct turns on using multiple radii or using radii that are less than those prescribed in the Austroads guides. And the intention of the Austroads guidance is that intersections can be safely navigated by unfamiliar drivers who might arrive at the intersection at a certain speed, perhaps 10, 15, 20 kilometres per hour, and expect to make a turn. They will likely expect to make turns in a similar way to they have at other intersections that they've been through. So it's to avoid surprises or the need to undertake unusual manoeuvres. Some other movements at the same intersection. You can see a slight encroachment at this corner here with the green vehicle path, but quite an overlap here between the two vehicle paths that would be allowed to make those turns concurrently. So that certainly could be improved. Something to be aware of when out on site is evidence of vehicles tracking into areas that we wouldn't want them to, perhaps behind a curb, striking an island, and so on. And you can see here, obviously, some vehicles have been tracking behind the curb there, presumably trucks. It's not necessarily an issue to do with a lack of space. There could be something else at play, perhaps excessive speeds around the corner there. So it's not necessarily all about swept paths, but these are the types of things as auditors that you want to be keeping an eye out for. Here we have a raised island, and trucks have been encroaching significantly on that island. You can see from the wheel marks through here that trucks have been tracking across this pedestrian crossing point here. Very little contrast between the road pavement, the concrete road pavement and the concrete island. So that's perhaps a contributing factor. This photo is from the Port of Melbourne, and it's been suggested to me that there is an issue with excessive speed here as well. So again, perhaps not an issue with a lack of space for the swept path, but perhaps more of a delineation issue or a speed issue. It's certainly undesirable that a truck would track across this pedestrian crossing area here. However, and the direction of travel is towards us, you would like to think that a truck driver would see a pedestrian waiting there and choose not to take that path if one was there. I'd be more concerned about a pedestrian waiting on the other side of the road. When articulated vehicles turn, there's a cut-in effect. The rear axles take a shorter radius than the front of the vehicle, and it can be difficult for the driver to understand where the back of the vehicle or its trailers will end up. And unfortunately, it's every year it's the case that pedestrians are struck at intersection corners in this situation. They're waiting at the corner, a large vehicle makes a tight turn, and the rear of the vehicle strikes the pedestrian.
So Jamie, sorry, one I missed in the Q&A. When you've got those conflicting vehicles in the intersection, overlapping, swept paths and those sort of things, as an auditor, should you be checking the signal phasing plan as well to, confirm that doesn't work, or do you just flag that and let them, respond to that and deal with it?
Yeah, you should. If the signal phasing was such that the movements couldn't occur concurrently, then the risk is largely addressed. There should be sort of some flexibility in intersection design. It would be desirable to cater for those movements to occur concurrently in case the signal phasing were to change in the future. But I suggest that you do look at the signal phasing as part of your assessment of risk of that issue.
Thank you.
Here we have a knockdown sign, which can be a sign that there isn't enough space for a turning vehicle. Another common example is the keep left sign on a splitter island at an intersection. You often see those signs knocked flat or installed with sort of rebounding posts. Again, can be an issue that there is enough space. There could be other things at play. Here you can see some evidence of vehicles tracking over the curb, some curb brakes. So that it certainly could be an issue here. Other issues that commonly arise relate to sight lines and sight distance. It might be the case that an intersection or a pedestrian crossing point doesn't have adequate sight distance. So this is another situation where you can put yourself out on the ground in a vehicle or on foot and think about whether you would feel safe entering an intersection or crossing the road, and so on. It's often the case that sight distance is obstructed by roadside objects or by the road alignment. Horizontal curves with trees or other objects on the inside of the curve have limited sight distance. Vertical curves or crests limit your sight distance as well. Near intersections, you might have parked vehicles. Near the intersection, you might have road furniture like trees and poles and signs and letterboxes and all of these things that mean that you can't see as well as you'd like, and certainly these things contribute to crashes. Vehicle stand-up angle refers to the angle at which you approach an intersection. It's desirable that you approach at a right angle or as close to a right angle as as possible, which allows you to see quite easily in both directions. It's where you have those acute approach angles or Y intersections that it can be difficult to view traffic approaching from at least one direction, and where we do see higher crash rates. So when it comes to sight distance, there's a whole list of different sight distance requirements that are all covered in the Austroads guides. One of those is abbreviated to SISD, and I reckon we might have a quiz question here, do we, Ken?
Let's have a look. 3, poll 1. I hope this is the right one. Well, I think people are already popping it into the chat. They want their prize, Jamie, because the poll doesn't give prizes. But I will give Ben a prize because he got in nice and quick with that one. But others are popping. Well, Brody was very closely followed behind. Yeah, Edwards made the point that with this group, you've got to answer the question before it's asked in order to get a prize.
And I can see that a few people have just jumped in on the first option in the list here, I think, just to try and get in quickly.
Yeah, I'm going to just display that because I think some people were, quick, smart doing that. Most people are saying safe intersection sight distance. Jamie, you happy with that as an answer?
Yeah, I'll take that.
That's correct. Very good.
So safe intersection sight distance is one of the many sight distance requirements. It specifically relates to intersections and specifically to vehicles or motorists on the main road, sighting vehicles entering from a side road and giving them enough time and space to anticipate a collision situation, put on the brakes and come to a stop before reaching that collision point. Other sight distance requirements, a stopping sight distance, which is your most basic requirement. Sometimes a plan set will, or a design report will include some information to demonstrate that sight distance requirements have been met. You can think about these types of things on site. You can do your own measurements on a plan set as well. But there are many: manoeuvre sight distance, crossing sight distance. And I suppose at the detailed design stage, it is important to have that awareness of the different sort of design parameters, and including sight distance, or have a person involved in the audit team that does. This snip comes from the Austroads guides, and I've mentioned them a few times. I'll point out as well that it's always important to refer to the supplements to the Austroads guide. And I'm not sure if it's a Victorian audience today, Ken, but Victoria has extensive supplements. Other states have their supplements as well. And those supplements do take precedence over the Austroads guide. So it's always important to consult the supplement as well when you're looking to an Austroads guide.
Yeah, we've got a good bit of a mix, Jamie. And I think maybe later on you've got some other sight distances that might pop up as a list. But while you've got that diagram up, what's the difference between safe intersection sight distance and stopping sight distance, just SSD?
SSD, stopping sight distance, a difference between many of the sight distance requirements is the heights that they're measured from and to. Stopping sight distance is measured from driver eye height to an object of an assumed height of 0.2 of a metre. That might be an object on the road, we look to provide SSD continually along all roads. So that's perhaps our most basic sight distance requirement. SISD, on the other hand, measured from, I think, driver eye height to you can see it in the bottom part of the diagram here, measured from driver eye height, or 1.1 metre, to the top of a car, 1.25 metres, which I think is sort of 15th percentile height of a vehicle or something like that.
Yeah.
Approach sight distance is another, which is numerically equal to stopping sight distance, but is measured from driver eye height to pavement level. And that's important at intersections, particularly where you're looking to see, hold lines, turn arrows, and these types of things.
Yep. Thank you.
This little plan shows a piece of road. It's quite a wide carriageway. And previously it was marked with a dividing line. And because of its width in peak times, it would operate as a 4-lane road when there were no parked vehicles present. The decision was made to formalise parking with some parking lanes. You can see the yellow lines there, and have the road operate as a 2-lane, 2-way road. Those parking lanes would extend 10 metres or stop 10 metres short of the intersection as per standards. All good in theory. This project was implemented and it looked like this, but very quickly after it was implemented, an issue arose with involving crashes with vehicles turning out of the side roads along this particular road. And you can see that the parked vehicles there have significantly obstructing sight lines for motorists turning out of those streets. This is a typical black spot safety issue where we see intersection type crashes. Perhaps I'll put it out to the group to suggest some treatments now to address the risk that's been introduced.
Okay, so I'll read out a few as they come in. They're pretty quick here, but I'll give it a minute, and then Jamie, if you like any particularly, that I'll give out some more prizes. Dotted lines. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Increase no stopping distance, no parking zone, remove parking, remove parking, remove parking, take out parking, parking, parking. They obviously don't work for councils, a lot of these people. No, but absolutely, as auditors, we don't need to stop ourselves from recommending something like that, because you're absolutely right, and look up sight lines. But let's see if we can get anything else going, eh?
Yeah, lots of good answers in there. Remove parking, certainly that would help if people were abiding by the restriction and not parking so close to the intersection, but sometimes easier said than done. Move the giveaway line forward. I'm liking that one. But to do that, you'd need to do some curb work. Curving out to the edge of the lane line. Someone's onto that.
It's Alex is onto that. You like that one in particular, did you?
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Okay, well, I think, yeah, there's somebody wants to build a tunnel.
Roundabout.
I like it. I like it. A roundabout. They did. I suppose this is a good example of where there is like an issue, and there's multiple ways to reduce the risk, isn't there? Some of them are expensive, and some of them are cheaper, and some of them are politically or community challenging, and some of them, more effective than others. And so, as auditors, we can give a few ideas. Often, I think auditors can be sometimes just say like one thing. They go, remove 2 car parks, and the client gets it, and they, absolutely can't do that, and then they're scratching their head. But if we've said, the ideal would be to remove some car park, but if that can't happen, curb out stand would be something to look at. Even though I reckon for a curb out stand, you probably need to remove some parking anyway there, wouldn't you? Curb out stand or moving the hold line forward, or these other options. So lots of good ideas. Even, people popping in there some good ones that I really always think should be investigated. Close the road. Do we need all these minor road access points? Is that feasible? Changing the speed limit on the main road, or ways to dampen speed down for the Mercedes there. That's a good thing to look at.
Yeah, lots of good suggestions there, and it, as you've sort of alluded to it, it's important not to, unless there's one obvious solution that just needs to happen. It's usually a good idea as an auditor to give the client or the project manager some options. We're not privy to all the considerations and constraints of a project. So if you just give one option and it can't be achieved, then the project manager might just say, well, we can't do anything about it, move on to the next item. But if you are providing a list of possible treatments, and this is a great example of one where you can provide a hierarchy of treatments from your primary safe system treatments like a roundabout or closing the road through to options that certainly reduce the likelihood, but not the severity of crashes that might still occur. I was getting ahead of myself a little before when I was talking about the different site distance requirements. There are many of the common ones explained. The Austroads guides provide all of the numbers and further description of what these all mean and when they should be applied. But if there are any further questions on site distance, I'm happy to take those. I just wanted to touch briefly on rural and remote roads, and particularly unsealed roads. We do quite a number of audits of these types of roads, and they're often sort of, proactive type audits. They're roads that have had a low sort of traffic function in the past, but due to some surrounding development or the like, they're seeing additional traffic and some improvements need to be made. So an audit might be done to inform those improvements or assess the level of risk with the existing road. They're often long, fairly monotonous stretches of road, as you can see in the image here. So some key things or some real sort of safety hotspots occur where there's variation in the road environment. So it might be to do with the surface, variability in the surface, corrugations, potholes, wet patches, and so on. Or there's a change in the geometry. So there might be a curve that can't be navigated at the speed that drivers are taking on the straights. So it's important to delineate features like those to ensure that they don't come as a surprise to motorists. So these, short of a major upgrade of the road, these are roads that typically don't warrant sort of major safety interventions. So we are talking about implementing, things to improve delineation, perhaps guideposts, warning signs to highlight motorists to those particular risks. This slide shows a list of common issues that come up at intersections in road safety audits. Now, there's mention in the corner there of the Guide to Road Safety checklists. I don't think they still exist, do they, Ken? But in previous editions of the guide, there were checklists for each of the audit stages.
So there's been some changes in that space, and I'm going to take the group through that at the end of this session, just so show them the prompt lists, which have replaced the checklists.
So particularly for newer or people that are new to auditing, it can be useful to have a checklist of issues to consider when you're undertaking an audit, and it will include all of those listed here and many more, and many of them won't be applicable to a particular project. But if you're following a checklist of that type, then it certainly ensures that you're thinking about all the right things. So these issues that occur at intersections, a lot of them relate to conflicts or potential conflicts between different vehicle streams or between vehicles and vulnerable road users, sight distance requirements, and so on. If there are any there that stand out to anyone, I'm happy to take any questions, or we can have a bit of a chat about them. But how are we looking for time, Ken?
Yeah, we're doing all right. We'll take a stretch break in 5 minutes, 8 minutes. I'll ask one on there. Back of queue issues. You want to tell us what's meant by that?
Back of queue issues come about when motorists don't anticipate encountering a queue. So it might be at an intersection, and you might have a queue at some signals, and that queue might be overflowing a right turn lane or something like that. So back of queue issues lead to rear end crashes usually. So often at intersections, you can also see back of queue issues on freeways, major roads where you've got turbulence maybe in the vicinity of an entry ramp or a weave or something, and you see some flow breakdown. They're freeways. You don't expect to encounter a queue, and we do see some serious back of queue issues on those types of roads, either rear ends or vehicles evading queues and spearing off the road into a median or the verge.
Yeah, and it's certainly an interesting one at design stage, because you're not only imagining the physical infrastructure built, the intersection built, so maybe there's no intersection there at the moment, or there's configuration changes in the intersection. You've not only got to imagine that, but then imagine it in operation in different times of different queue lengths, and thinking about sight lines to end of queue and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's a good example of where we need to be a little bit imaginative as auditors in operation. Good. Don't see any particular questions on any of those coming up. Now, it's interesting to note that a number of those were research assignments. People did their research assignments on, so for some people will be very comfortable and aware of those. So that's intersections. Did you have?
That's intersections. At mid-block locations, the focus is a little different. We're not worried about those sort of conflicts between turning movements and so on. It's more about the cross section of the roadside environment, providing space and separation for vulnerable road users if they're present. Sight distance requirements along the road and these types of things. Again, these are all spelt out in the checklists. It's really at mid-block locations, we're thinking about run-off road crashes. We're thinking about head-on crashes and, perhaps crashes involving vulnerable road users if they're present, and these type of things.
So a question on sight distance. What size an object would you consider a sight distance impediment? A small tree or bush or a small power pole? I mean, are these sight distance impediments, or is there going to be something big?
It's a good question, and probably the guidance is a little bit grey in this area. You know, do you consider things like trees and poles near intersections as sort of sight distance, you know, impediments, or and you know, well, they certainly are to some extent, but usually, you know, if something has a fairly small diameter, you can sort of see behind it or in front of it. It depends on your road geometry, sort of approaching the intersection, how much of an impact it can have. So I don't have a sort of magic number in terms of size for you, but it's very much a case by case thing.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain on that because I think I bet. I'll come back to the group on that because I know we do a lot of thinking about that with motorcyclists and bike riders as well, being smaller, and whether they're, you know, like when you're doing, say, a shared path crossing and you're doing your sight line calculations on that, you really start to consider some smaller objects being sight line impediments in those situations. I'll have a look into it a little bit, see if I can add anything. I mean, your principles are absolutely spot on, Jamie. Whether or not somebody's has documented and decided on a specific, that I'll see if I can find it.
It's an interesting one, and one that comes up a lot. If it's a single object, pole or tree, then usually it's not, you know, sort of a big impediment. But, you know, if you've got a series of things that might line up to obstruct sight lines, then it certainly can be significant.
That's one you're very you're always hot to point it out when there's barrier jobs and they're blocking potential sight lines exiting and entering side roads and the like, where you've got, you know, can see through the barrier if you're in the right spot, but when that all lines up, it can be quite an impediment, can't it? Good. All right. Anything else you got there, Jamie?
No, that's all the slides from me.
Well, you timed that one beautifully. And yeah, we're going to have a short break. If anybody did have any other questions associated with the content Jamie's just presented, feel free to pop them into the chat as we take our break. And it's a nice little lead in there to Tony's presentation. We've got Tony Bull, who is coming in, and Tony, I've made you co-host, so you should be able to actually, show yourself. There you are. Well done. So I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes, and then we will come back. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for your time. And 5 minutes, and we will get back into it. And I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, well, let's get back into it, and I welcome Tony Bull to the stage. And Tony will give a little bit more of his background shortly, but Tony's certainly somebody that a lot of people will likely know if they've been involved in construction site safety, because Tony's certainly a very passionate person associated with keeping road users and road workers safe at construction sites, and has been a very valuable member of many of the Austroads committees, the Australian Standards committees, and quite a few others. And Tony recently, after a good stint in government, joined Safe System Solutions. And Tony is one of only a very small number of people who is an approved ASHTAS trainer, which is the Austroad Safety Hardware Training and Accreditation Scheme. And you can see behind Tony's head there a road safety barrier, and Tony is going to be being out and about around the country, is training up and administering the testing for people to become licensed to work with barrier systems. So no longer will we just have a bit of free for all of people putting them in. You'll have to have some minimum competency requirements, and even designers and engineers that are working with barrier systems should have upskilled themselves and be competent with some of that. So Tony will be excitedly doing that. Anybody who's interested in that training and accreditation and licensing scheme should get in contact with us, and we can give you some more info. But that's not what Tony won't be talking about, the ASHTA scheme. He's more general on this one. He's a multi-talented man. Yeah, but we can do those road safety audits of construction sites and inject that safety in. And so ask Tony to come along and give us a few insights. As I say always when you're about to present, Tony, I told Tony that, and he said, beautiful. So how many days do I get to present? And I say, no. I know you want to. We're only going to give you a short sort of 40 minutes. And so Tony's recorded a longer version, still not 4 days. We kept him to about an hour on the longer version as well. But it's going to be available in the learning management system if you want extra content around work sites. But he's got a condensed version, which he's going to give to us now. Again, I'm in the background looking at the chat. So over to you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Ken, and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me along. And Ken, I will ask you if you could keep an eye on the chat, because I encourage questions absolutely anytime through the presentation. Please, if you've got a burning question, please put it up on the chat, and we'll attempt to resolve that there and then. If we can keep it, I know it's a bit difficult over these distance type services or versions, but if we can have a bit of two-way, always happy to be part of that. So welcome everybody, and see if I can get on to the next slide. There we go. So yeah, as Ken mentioned, I almost got 39 years with the Department of Transport. Well, I think they're DTP now, Department of Transport and Planning. So I didn't get to the new acronym. But yeah, I spent a long time there, worked on international projects, Dubai, Indonesia, Philippines. And as Ken mentioned, I've been on the Australian Standards and Off-Road Committee member. And actually, currently, Safe System Solutions are assisting Austroads with a review of the current guidance material for traffic management at roadworks. So I'm back involved. I've done a bit of a circle, so it's wonderful to be able to continue that input into those documents. Yeah, I've been with Safe Systems now for 3 months, and as Ken mentioned, part of it will be that barrier training. But I've been involved in this road safety audit process. I think it's nearly up for 20 years in the worksite safety traffic management area. I've trained traffic controllers, people in traffic management implementation, and over my years with Vic Roads, Department of Transport alike, I've been involved mainly with road construction and road maintenance in the project management, but also in the latter years, I was also part of the asset management team, looking at the current contracts that are being delivered throughout regional Victoria. So, it's been a great journey, and I see my journey with Safe System Solutions as a continuation with experience and new learning. So, I'm appreciative of being able to continue on with this training. This photo is, it's just a bit of I suppose, a helicopter view of what we often see as a perception of what is put in front of us. And oftentimes with traffic management at roadworks, and even general signing and the like out on our road network, we can sometimes be a little bit blinded by what we see. And the car park at the Vic Roads office in Warrnambool, they just had some dots down to depict, the bays to park in. And, for the years that I worked out of that office, it was always 90-degree parking. But sort of when you take a step back, it could have been 45 or it could have been 90. And this is, one day in the car park, we had two different opinions on what should have been. And it's really just to give people who are undertaking the road safety audit, who are undertaking road safety audits, to really have a very open-minded view of what is in front of you and what the travelling public, the pedestrians, what are they actually seeing? What are they reading into what's being offered in front of them? And oftentimes it can be misleading. You've got so many conflicting signs, line marking, delineation and the like, that it can become a blur, and all of a sudden you can get confusion. And this was just a really good example of what people see, what has been put in front of them. And as a result of it, they've actually put in line marking, not just the RPMs to depict the parking. The other question we often get asked, and we need to probably dig into a little bit, is what is a road safety audit in traffic management, and what is the compliance audit? And oftentimes, as road safety auditors, they are frequently approached to conduct an independent audit of an intended or installed roadworks traffic management provision. And just reviewing the applicable standards and guidelines for the site is not a road safety audit in the true sense. And despite, the overall objective is that is safety related. That's what we're wanting to achieve, to make sure the site is safe. But checking it against standards and guides and codes of practice isn't the road safety, a true sense of the word, a road safety audit. The road safety audit part of it is the identification of risks and hazards related to the works that are being currently undertaken. And what also the effect on the permanent traffic management infrastructure and that ongoing operation at that location. Far too often, we've got a slide in a minute, we slow the traffic down to a speed that is acceptable for worker protection, or to make it safer for the workers, or we have separation. But oftentimes the permanent signing gets mixed up with the temporary signing, and we get a mismatch of speed values. And so, it's those types of things that the risks and the hazards that have been identified. Yes, you would identify that through a compliance audit, but the road safety audit will also look at other items of safety that could be part of what has been introduced through that temporary traffic management arrangement. So it's all about making sure that all the risks and hazards have been looked at. Have they been managed? Have they been mitigated? Have they been removed? All of those things through the hierarchy of control. And I'm sure you've all had your OHS training, looked at the hierarchies of control. And of course, the first thing we want to do in that hierarchy is can we eliminate the hazard? Can we reduce the exposure to the hazard? Of course, the biggest hazard to road workers is the live traffic. And just a quick question out to the group, Ken, how would we reduce that hazard for the road workers? What would be the best way that we can control that traffic? What would be, through looking at the hierarchy of control, what is the best way to reduce that risk?
Well, they're in quick on remove all cars, road closure, isolate.
Lovely. And that's exactly what those quick answers on this one, Ken, that's exactly right. Is there a possibility to detour? Can we isolate? Absolutely. And, isolation could be the use of barriers, temporary barriers, as long as, deflection areas are being managed and the like. So, yeah, detours, there's certain risks with those. Is the detour route capable of taking the traffic loads or the traffic volumes that on the road we're managing? So it's all of those questions to be asked, and the results, and it might be a combination. And the engineering side of things is part of it. Can we put up some type of isolation? Can we put in some speed management? Can we get delineation that will, some chicanes or like, just to slow that traffic down? So it's those types of outcomes we want to do to try and reduce those hazards.
And I'm going to give a prize to Edward there, who's the first in on that.
Sorry, I was about to sneeze. Apologise.
I know, that's all right. I had a sneezing fit the other day running online training. It lasted about 10 minutes. So.
I'm back. Thanks, Ken. So, and while I mentioned that the compliance audit isn't a road safety audit, but as a road safety auditor, to have an understanding of what is required for management of traffic at roadworks, and the new Austroads guides, although probably not so new now, they were at the end of 2019. Now they were introduced, and it's 10 parts, and copies of these will be part of the pack that Ken will be supplying for this training course. And to have an understanding of these documents, don't have to know them from cover to cover, but to have an understanding of what is available. If questions get asked, or yourself, you might be not quite sure of something, where to go and look for them. So you've got the Australian Standard 1742 Part 3, which is, it talks about what the signs can and can't do, what signs should and shouldn't be used and alike. And originally the guidance material was in the standard. So that was why these Austroads guides were developed. They took the guidance material out of the standard, have these guidance material available. And and these are updated regularly. As I mentioned earlier, that they're going through a review at the moment. So they're continually improvement, as signs and devices are improved or become available. They can go through a process of testing, they can go through a process of trialing, and if they are deemed to be a suitable item to be included in these documents, then that process is certainly a lot better than going through the standards process. So it's a really good step forward. So that's another question, Ken, very quickly. What's the difference between a TGS, traffic guidance scheme, and a TMP, a traffic management plan? Okay,
let's see what the this learned group has to say on that. We've got a few things starting to come in. Let's see. Traffic guidance scheme is diagram only. Traffic guidance scheme is a drawing. TMP is a report. Traffic guidance scheme is the aerial plan. Risk assessment. I'm not sure what's that particularly referring to. Any of those particularly grab your fancy?
Yeah, look,
hang on, we got another one here. TGS is included in a TMP.
Yeah, I like that. There was someone who mentioned the risk assessment. The TGS is actually an outcome of a risk assessment. So the risk assessment should actually end up in your traffic management plan. And I'll go straight to the definitions. But yeah, there was a few that were, I'd say all of them together probably ended up with the where we needed to head. But I think there was one there, Ken, that said something about the aerial view of the signs or something like that. And the other ones is the document or.
Yeah, there's some good ones. I will pick a few prizes, I think, behind the scenes. Well, you keep going.
Excellent. So yeah, a traffic guidance scheme is really the arrangement, the signs and devices that are going to be used to warn traffic or persons to guide them through, past or around a work site or temporary hazard. So and this is out of the Austroads Guide for the AGTM, Austroads Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. That's the ones we just, the 10 parts. And a traffic management plan is the document describing all essential traffic management matters. So it looks at the risk assessments. It looks at what mitigation has been put in place to address those hazards and risks. So yeah, associated with the roadworks and works on roads, this includes a risk assessment, traffic demands and accommodation, traffic routing, control and provision of vulnerable road users, and special vehicles such as, you know, how we're going to manage emergency vehicles if they need to get through our sites. Looking at bus timetables, trams movements, you know, I said buses, even over-dimensional vehicles that might be on an over-dimensional route. It's all those items that you need to consider. So that becomes your plan. And out of that plan, you will then develop, you know, it might be 1, 2, 10 different traffic guidance schemes. It could be the different staging. It could be that for nighttime or daytime or working hours or out of working hours. All of those items that you have identified in your plan are to be managed, and that's the signs and devices you will place on the road. And as an auditor, I would encourage you to ask for both those documents at the very early onset of being requested to undertake a road safety audit. It'll give you an idea of whether they're just the company or the people who are managing the site, or even the department that's managing the site, whether they've just gone through a cut and paste process, or whether that it's really been a thought about process, and, you know, have they actually undertaken the proper assessments of traffic volumes, risk assessments, hazard assessments, mitigation processes and the like, or have they just, you know, done a bit of photocopying and just grabbed a sort of a commonly used traffic guidance scheme to be part of that traffic management plan. So it's a good way of really working out whether, you know, the traffic management has been seriously taken and is being owned by the company who is actually physically undertaking the work, or the principal contractor. This isn't just left up to the traffic management company. And that's just a lovely segue into this particular photo. And as I mentioned earlier, this unfortunately is far too common, where you get the two incorrect speeds. You get the one that's wanted for the protect the workers, and the one that is the normal speed value. And unfortunately, you know, this has just totally been wrongly installed. Well, when I actually did stop at this site, and I asked, it was a power company that was doing work on their power lines, and, you know, I said to them, you know, how come you've got a mismatch of the speed values? And the manager of the site from the power company said, oh, I talked to the traffic management team. And I said, who actually is responsible for this site? And he said, oh, we are. Well, I said, that means you're responsible for the signing as well. And he was a little bit perplexed by that, but it really, to try and pass on that to the traffic management company, that responsibility is not correct. You know, the owner of the site needs to make sure that the traffic management company is doing their bit. If they've got a subcontractor in, you know, with a front end loader, they've got to make sure that it's coming on site, that it's safe, it's done its morning inspection or the daily inspections and the like, and has the regular service inspections and the like. So it really is the principal who is doing the work is ownership of all those safety requirements of the site. And anyway, the traffic management company said, oh, they didn't have enough signs on board to cover up the 100. So he thought if we just put it beside the 100, the 40, the lower speed, that's what people would travel at. But unfortunately, that's not the outcome that will be achieved. So yeah, it is. It does become an issue with the management of speed when we have those incorrect signings put up. So why are we going to undertake this audit? Roadwork sites, they typically involve a change of speed environment. It can often create additional conflicts. It does create normally a confined road space where the sharing of the road space between workers and the travelling public can cause those conflict points. And it does increase that potential for crashes. So we've got to make sure that what has been put out onto the road to manage all of what I just mentioned is not going to actually increase the potential for crashes, that we're actually going to create a safe environment for people, that they are advised of what's going to happen. They're guided through the site to ensure that they get through without conflicts with the road working crews or the machinery. And when they get to the end of the job, that they're told that that's it. Thank you very much. We're glad that everything worked well, and this is a speed you can go back up to. And that is often a one that is typically lost, is letting the travelling public know that that roadwork speed limit has finished, and they're told that the prevailing speed is now back for them to the travelling public can travel at. So that is one to also look out for when you're undertaking your audits. Another reason, traffic arrangements during roadworks can change several times, and really they don't really bear any resemblance on the permanent arrangements. And we're humans, we're creatures of habit. If we're driving to work every day at the same time, we go through the same intersections, we see the same signing, the same speed limits and the like. And unfortunately, we do become a little bit robotic behind the wheel in what we do. But when there's changes, we've got to make sure that we're warning those drivers that have become a little bit complacent on that daily trek, that they are aware of these changes. And they can change, it says several times over the period of a roadworks. I don't go to Melbourne that often, but the current works on the Westgate Freeway, the changes that happen for the times that I see it, the last time I was down there, the lanes that took you to the ring road, they now take you to Geelong, and it just didn't feel right. I actually felt as if I was in the wrong lanes. And so, and thank goodness the markings on the ground were well, they were nice and clean to understand. The signing was well, it was clean, and also, so it gave you reassurance that you actually were in the right lanes as I was heading back towards Geelong and not towards the ring road. So yeah, it's really important that when those changes are implemented, that it gives the travelling public the confidence that they are in the correct lane. And far too often we see those at those conflict points that people are making those decisions far too late, and they're lane cutting off, they're going into the gore area and the like. So it's really important that we get that advance warning message out and in a strong way, so that people have the chance to make the right decisions in those type of situations. Often our construction contractors may not appreciate the finer points of traffic management, roadside safety, and the operation of safety devices. And this is the important part about being a road safety auditor, is this independence. It's got to be a person who is independent of the project. And I know when I was managing roadwork projects, that you often were focused on, we need to deliver this, we need to get this delivered on time and on budget, and all those things in between. And that's why you can't really do an audit or road safety audit on your own project, because you can sometimes have blinkers on. And that's why a road safety audit is such a powerful tool. You've got these independent set of eyes looking at the project in its entirety to make sure that it's operating safely for all those who are on that site, whether it be the travelling public, pedestrians, or the workers and the use of their machinery on that site. As I said, it's a really powerful tool. We do have to check that the standard arrangements are being applied for consistency, to access whether standard arrangements are adequate for the particular conditions, really avoiding conflicting messages. And that was that photo I had up earlier, the two different speeds between the permanent and temporary devices. Line marking, that's a really sometimes difficult one, because we want to create, especially in the multi-lane areas, we want to delineate or have the line marking, for those particular sites. But if all of a sudden you do a major change in the way that you're doing undertaking the roadworks, sometimes that line marking needs to be removed. Oftentimes you'll just see the black paint put down, but in the wet or at night time under headlights, that black paint can shine up as if it's a dull line marking. So it's best to grind that line marking off and start again to in the fresh lines that you want to work under. So yeah, it's important that those temporary type arrangements are removed. So there's no ghosting at all. To check that signs are used for their correct purpose. Yes, we often see prepare to stop used without traffic controllers being put in place. We see roadwork symbolic signs left up overnight. It's all those types of things that under the road safety audit process, and even a compliance audit, making sure that signs and devices are being used for their correct purpose and not being left up or not up inside or outside of our working hours. No questions have poked through just yet, Ken? I'll just sort of touch base.
No, we're good so far. Keep ticking along.
And how's my time frame looking?
Oh, you've got another 10 or 12 minutes
Okay.
if you need it.
No, that's fine. I just, like, as you mentioned, I can get lost in the moment and continue to push the safety message. So keep an eye on me. Thanks, Ken.
Okay.
And really, these last couple of dot points, I probably can't push this hard enough. What we're trying to achieve here is we're providing for the safety of the works personnel and the travelling public. We've got to make sure that the changes we're undertaking, yes, we want to improve the road network. Yes, we need to make sure that these safety aspects are being upgraded, an intersection upgrade, but we need to make sure while those works are being undertaken that we're not affecting the way that the site is the safety of the site is being managed, isn't being compromised. And again, I'll repeat, as a road safety auditor, it's a really strong way of getting that look at the site to make sure that it is operating the way it can or potentially could operate in a better way. And the last one on the list is the crossing points. Oftentimes they can be a little bit forgotten as well, that crossing points can sometimes look as if they're an access point for the public and or vice versa, that the public don't appreciate the crossing points and therefore aren't aware of, there could be construction plant coming out. So again, make sure that they are managed to ensure that they're used for what they're meant to be used for. And look, I hope this comes up okay on people's screens. This was a construction of an overtaking lane on the Princess Highway between Warrnambool and Geelong. And what the works were doing was they were doing preliminary earthworks. And so there was really no effect on the through traffic. But as you can see, there's wire rope there, but they've come across rock and they've actually stacked it close to the wire rope. And the outcome of that is you're actually taking away what the wire rope is put there. You've actually created a hazard. If there was an errant vehicle the deflection zone has now been filled up with a non-movable object, and therefore it becomes a hazard to the road user. So again, that wouldn't be picked up on a compliance audit, because it would be seen that, oh yes, the road is still being able to be used for what it's intended to. There's no interference for the through traffic, but there has been a hazard created because of the roadworks. And this is a really great example of what an audit should be able to pick up and say, well, hey, you've created this hazard. They're too close to the deflection, or it's within the deflection area of that wire rope. So therefore, there should be something done about that. So it's, in addition to your signs and devices and the like, there's also, because of the roadworks, it's actually introduced a hazard to the road users. This was one I only took recently as well. It's a walking track that I take on a regular basis. I won't say daily. I would like to do it more often, but over the crest of this, it's a shared driveway, shared footpath for people to get access to the local river and walking path along that river. There was a development beyond these signs, and I'm not too sure what other footpath the pedestrians are going to use when they get up there. And of course, who is this set of signs no good for? And that'll be a question to the group.
Right. While we see what comes in on that, Alex had a interesting question. Over your 39 years in the industry, 20 years in road safety, how close to a utopian outcome are we now for traffic management? Are we there yet? Are we there yet, or are we getting closer?
That's a really great question, Ken, and we're getting far better. But I also feel that sometimes the travelling public are becoming less tolerant to our roadwork, so we need to cater for that as well. But the utopia we would like to achieve is to eliminate the traffic from our work sites altogether, and that's why I said at the start of the session that the best way is to eliminate the traffic. So yes, we can get there, but what is then used as engineering, what is used as administrative, we're certainly getting better than that. And I know, when I first started in this industry, if we were doing works on roads, we'd put out a little 900 by 600 aluminium sign with worker symbol. No, it had road worker. It was all in words. So yeah, we have improved, but we need to have better education. We need to have the McDonald's theory, and that's get these kids' meals cheap and get them to be McDonald's eaters for their whole life. So let's train them when they see roadworks, they comply with the roadwork signing, all those types of things. So there's education, there's improved signing of devices, there's improved driver awareness, but we are continually trying to improve that. So I don't think we'll ever get to utopia unless we eliminate the traffic.
Okay, and before I jump into the answer to your question, Tom's got another a question around who's actually requesting these road safety audits of construction site work. So, because Tom's at a local council in Victoria, and he can't say his council has ever requested a road safety audit of a construction site traffic management sort of. So who's doing that? Is it only arterial roads, or who?
Well, I can't answer for the councils as such, Ken, but I know the departments, such as the Department of Transport and Planning, that they build it into their contract specifications. So they will say that this is a reasonably complex type contract. We want you to undertake 3 road safety audits, one at design stage, one at middle of construction, and one post-opening. So that there will be that from a specification point of view. And it normally, and I'm sort of surprised that the council that the guy was from haven't requested them along the way, because it's just another tool to be able to make sure that safety is being at the top of the list to ensure that the site should be operating as it is. And I think people attending these training courses is a great way of actually getting that word out to local government that they are available. And you probably find, Ken, that your company is more services are asked for some councils more than others, maybe because of what they aren't aware of, the ones who aren't asking for them.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think your point there around complexity is a good one, because we wouldn't expect full-blown road safety audits done on minor local government works where it's a very low risk site from the speed of traffic and the like. We would expect that the surveillance officers and others would have an eye for safety in those areas to look for different hazards and the like. When it gets to those scenarios where we're in slightly higher speed environments or there's more complexity to it, this is where your risk assurance processes in a local government should be looking at what can we get done to reassure us that we've considered the safety of our community, and road safety audits are certainly one of those ones available to you. But as I say, for the more complex or the bigger ones for local government, and it's just with state managed roads, there tend to be a lot more that are more complex and more at higher speed and more volume and more risk. So that's why they probably get a few more. But the answer's in there. We've got a number of people saying people with disabilities, and a couple of people just saying everybody those signs are not going to be too helpful for. Nobody drilled down into a little bit further, but what did you think?
I was actually after disability. It was one, but the visually impaired. This would have been such a coming across this. There's nowhere for them. There's no direction for them to follow to cross that road safely. Admittedly, if I'd taken the photo a little bit wider, there's an intersection that has got DDA available, and they could have used that as a crossing point or installed temporary DDA as a crossing point. It would have been far better than just putting the signing way up. That would be 150 odd metres away from a potential crossing point or an appropriate crossing point, to be honest. It's at a roundabout. It's got a refuge in the middle of the crossing point. So it would have been very appropriate to be able to just a little bit more insight or thought about how to manage the pedestrians for that particular scenario.
Couple more minutes, Tony.
Okay. Again, just another pedestrian issue that, unfortunately was left overnight and could have been managed a lot better. Signing that is nearly right. You've got to have the stop here on red signal, but it should be the red writing on a white background, where this is just your traditional roadwork signing, black writing on a yellow background. So just be aware of those sort of items when you're doing your audits. I'll go past that one today, Ken, seeing though we've only got a couple of minutes. But if you ever see anybody using that type of stop sign, the round one is the one we should be using under the road rules. The round stop sign, if it's displayed in front of the driver must remain stopped until directed otherwise. Whereas the octagonal one is the driver makes a decision, nothing coming, I can proceed. But that's why traffic controllers shouldn't be using the octagonal one. A well-dressed and also the appropriate PPE, high vis, and a good clean quality stop slow bat. So that's what you want to see at a site. When to audit. This diagram is pretty important in the way that we undertake the audit process. You can review the plans and the guidance schemes, but make sure you do a day and night inspection of the site. Then you've got consider audits where early in construction, so it can be that assurance is undertaken to make sure that the site is working the way it should be. And again, inspect the site day and night. And again, if there's any major changes to the scheme and another road safety audit is warranted, make sure you inspect the site day and night. Just a daytime inspection is not appropriate. Common issues, inadequacy of advance warning, the proposed speed limits aren't correct, the appropriateness of the layout, the conflicts that are being created. We've probably spoken about most of these anyway, but dirty signs may not show up in the daytime, but at night time you'll notice that the signs aren't as effective as they should be. Making sure that the provisions for pedestrians and the less agile ones, provision for cyclists are also being managed through the work site. So that's probably it from me, Ken. If there's anything, burning questions, sorry, I just rushed that last couple of minutes, but I can get caught up in the process. But and the only other thing that Ken, you're going to talk about the prompt list now.
Jumping into that.
Certainly, they're the tool that can be used for assisting auditors, especially those just starting out in the game, to assist in that process. So that's it for me.
Beautifully done, Tony. Passionate as always. And Tony's contact details in front of his slides. Of course, you can just come through to myself or the training team, and they can connect you if you want to talk in depth about traffic management with Tony. As I said, we've got a link to a bit of a longer presentation from Tony in the learning management system, along with some of those other documents. So thank you very much, Tony. Excellent. And looking forward to getting ASHTAS up and running. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ken. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day and the course.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm going to steal the slides in a second just to round out our last little bit. If I can remember how to do that myself, I should be able to do it. Here we go. And I'll pick up here just a couple of last things to cover. So Tony mentioned prompt lists, and I've mentioned them very briefly before, but I'm going to jump into that again. So they are in the back of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6. And they start off with this weirdly named thing, front loading, which is really just about gathering the context of the project and understanding why the project's happening and any sort of commitments. They're really there just as a way that you could use, up to you, to gather context around the project that you're about to audit as a team, and you can write yourself some notes there. So that's in there. But really, these are the prompt lists. And so there's prompt lists covering local alignment, general aspects, intersections, walking, cycling, traffic signs, line marking, lighting. And for each one of these, like H3, H4, you'll see that there's feasibility, preliminary, detailed, pre-opening, existing roads. And these questions are exactly as we say up there, they are to prompt your thinking. So you think about, is there provision for right-turning vehicles? Is that required? Is it there? And so you'll be thinking through that. You don't hand your checklist in, you don't put these questions into your audit, they just prompt your thinking. You might go, oh yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Right. Oh, we better consider that in our audit. So they are thought starters only. What you have to do is stand back, look broadly at the project, at the scheme, use those to prompt thinking. There's going to be heaps of them in there that you will sort of put as not applicable because they're trying to cover all road scenarios. And you don't submit that prompt list in part of your road safety audit report. So that's all I really wanted to say on prompt lists. And in our last sort of 5 minutes here, I'm going to take you back to module 1, and I'm going to talk you through primary and supporting treatments, because your whole quiz is associated with getting your head around this. Okay, and it's not particularly easy. This document, the Safe System Assessment Framework, this helps you, and there's information in that. That is in the learning management system, in the resources, so you've got a copy of that ready to go. Primary treatments are road planning, design, and management considerations that virtually eliminate the potential for fatal and serious injury crashes occurring associated with foreseeable crash types, supporting a road planning design and management considerations that improve the overall level of safety associated with foreseeable crash types, but are not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal and serious injuries occurring. It also doesn't change the ability to implement one of these. I think it'll probably be easy if I just take you through one example, and then I jump you into the learning management system. I'm just going to draw an intersection up here. Jamie talked to us about parking there. Okay. We've got parking bays. They're blocking sight lines. Okay. We talked about a lot of different treatments that could be done there. Now, each of the treatments could be categorized as either a primary treatment or a supporting treatment. But the issue here, okay, is different to the crash type we're thinking about. The issue we're thinking about is blocking of the sight line. The crash type we're thinking about is the vehicle exiting here being struck by this vehicle. So what we're saying is, if we remove some car parks and we meet our sight distance requirements, that is only a supporting treatment. Okay. Yes, we've eliminated the issue as such, but the crash can still occur, that right angle crash, at the same speed. Okay. It may be that instead of this driver making a bad choice because they couldn't see, they overshot this, they misjudged the speed of the vehicle, and we've still got this same crash type. So the primary treatment or example of some primary treatments would be those things like a roundabout, because we know that that slows down this vehicle and that crash type it doesn't happen at the speed and the severity to cause death and serious injury passenger vehicle to passenger. It could be raising this intersection, for example. That would be a primary treatment, assuming you can get speeds down. People often say, oh, well, signalizing it must be a primary treatment. That's a supporting treatment as well, just because we know people run the red lights quite often. So that's one example there. I'm going to jump you over just in the last minute here to the learning management system, as long as I can find it. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah. So in the learning management system, which hopefully you're seeing on, yep, you can see that on the screen. So you see here in resources, reference documents, that's the Safe System Assessment Framework. And if you go into there, into the Safe System Assessment Framework, around page 14 starts a description of it. And then you can see you get different crash types, and you get what are primary treatments, what are supporting treatments, and these are other supporting treatments. There's two there's a subcategory of supporting, but we just talk about supporting or primary. And so you can see different things. You can also see what they influence: exposure, likelihood, or severity. And you get that for head-on crashes, you get that for intersection crashes, other crash types, pedestrian crashes, cyclist crashes, motorcyclist crashes. So that can be very useful as you're going through your quiz, because today's quiz, as I say, is very much focused on that categorization, and also a little bit of thinking about exposure and likelihood and severity. But so yeah, select the option that best describes a primary treatment. There you go. You can look back at your notes and see which one of those supporting. Then you got some scenarios to work through. So hopefully, well, I definitely say now you're going to find this harder than other quizzes because it really does take a bit of understanding of that. We've tried to cover it. We've pointed you at the notes, but it's, yeah, there's a little bit of thinking to be done there. And on that note, I think unless anybody's got any burning questions, I will let you go and have a crack at that. Next module, you'll be assigned a site and you will get your instructions for your actual road safety audit, or mock road safety audit. We've tailored it a bit. Primary cause eliminates that crash type possibility, yes, or it makes it all within tolerable force levels. So yeah, the crash might still be able to happen, but if it happens, we know people are going to survive it. So site locations are already in the learning management system. That's okay. If you wanted to look at your site, you can. You're going to get instructions on what you need to do though. And they're in your local area. We'll give you good detailed instructions next time. But if you wanted to look ahead, of course, if you did look ahead and you discovered, I don't live there anymore, or you know, I don't live in that area anymore, or it's actually I'm holidaying in Queensland and looking, doing this course remotely, we can give you a site in Queensland. We can give you a site closer to wherever you are. So just let us know. We've tailored all of those, but we'll give you good instructions on that next time. Thank you. You've got a few different presenters today. I hope you enjoyed that. I think you're back just with me on Thursday. But thank you. Great input as usual. And we shall see you on Thursday. Log in early, chance to win a prize. Thanks, everyone.